Rightio, so there's two Google slides that I really want you all to have a look at and make sure you understand. The first one is one that I gave you the other day. It's really handy things that a few of you seem to have forgotten in the last few weeks. It's a pretty apt name because it does what it says in the on the packet. It's a bunch of things that are really useful for you to look over in case you've forgotten bits and pieces over the last few weeks, because we have done a lot of stuff and some of you have struggled a bit, so I've given you this to make it easy for you. You're welcome, but definitely look at that. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is the rubric. Now, I keep telling you all this, but some of you seem to not believe me, but the only way I can give you marks is if you do the things on this rubric. Okay, it's really important that you understand what it means and how to use this to get marks, because a lot of the marks aren't that complicated. Really simple things. If you can attempt to act on feedback, that's easy. That is so easy. All you need to do is take the things that I tell you after you've submitted your draft and try to do a few of them, and I can give you an extra mark. It's silly not to take advantage of this, okay? Now, quick maths, there are 19 criteria on that rubric, okay? You can count them yourself if you don't believe me. Now that means that each criterion is worth 5.26%. So this is the Manor Lakes College grading scale, and as you'll be able to see, each of the marks is spaced roughly 5 marks apart, okay? So E is 41 to 45. So potentially, if you were sitting on 45, which is an E, and if you were to get one more criterion on that rubric, that would take you through to 50.26, which would take you through a whole grade. Okay, so each one of these criterion is worth 1/2 mark, or 1/2 grade. So take it from a D plus to a C to a C plus. So if you can find a way to get 2 more of the criteria on the rubric, that'll get you up a whole grade. So really smart to take advantage of that as much as you can. Okay, so this is what the things mean. You'll see discussion. So in this column, is the discussion of the text accurate and relevant? It needs to be both of them. If it's not, then start again. Okay, so is your discussion accurate? Are your talking points and quotes from the book, or are they from the movie or somewhere else? If they're from the movie and not from the book, guess what you need to do? Okay, are all of your words word for word? Are all of your quotes word for word from the book? That's really important too. Make sure they're all correct. Is your discussion relevant? Okay, is it linked to both the prompt and the topic sentence? If it's not, don't do it. Are you accidentally trying to write down everything you know about the topic? Because we all do that from time to time, or is it to the point? Are you making the time-honored mistake of retelling the story? That's a really big don't on that one. Remember, you're not trying to retell the story. I can read the story, okay? What I want to understand is, your insights. You need to analyze the story. You need to pull apart the bits and tell me what they mean. That's what analysis is, okay? Does your discussion include analysis of narrative elements, okay? Now, while hip-hop has 4 elements, in case you're wondering, it's DJing, MCing, breakdancing, and graffiti. Narrative elements include 6 elements, okay? So the plot, so things that happen in the beginning, the middle, and end. The narrative structure, which is where we're talking about Freytag's pyramid. So you've got the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and denouement. The setting, so where and when the story is set and what that means. The characterization, so what we know about the characters and how we know that. Remember, there's direct and indirect characterization. Themes. Now, themes are usually abstract nouns that underpin the story. So, coming of age, or intimacy, or sexuality are all possibilities here. Language choices, the way that Charlie says what he says. What does that mean? How does that change things? Okay. Now, does your discussion analyze at least one of these? Make sure it does. Okay. If you've got problems with this, see me on Meets and we can sort it out. Okay. Now, Does your discussion demonstrate the ability to infer? Now, this is one of the higher order ones. Now, to infer something is to take pieces of explicit information, so things that are mentioned explicitly in the text, in the words, and use them to arrive at a conclusion that isn't explicit, right? That's not exactly laid out for you word for word. So you might remember in the Sherlock Holmes movie, so Robert Downey Jr., not the guy who has trouble with the word penguin, he looks at a pocket watch, right, and he sees that it's scratched around the winding hole, because remember, old pocket watches need to wind every week or a couple of days to keep them ticking, and from this, because it's scratched, he infers that the owner was an alcoholic. Do you remember that? Maybe not. Anyway, try to do that. Try to take information from the text which is explicit and see if you can arrive at a conclusion that is implicit. Okay? It's not explicit. Symbolism is really important. Okay? So, do you identify a literary device? Okay, now we did go over this, and I put it in that slideshow. For the really useful stuff. Do you remember in week 8 when we looked at symbolism, colloquialism, flashbacks, foreshadowing, euphemism, and allusion? If you don't, it's a really good time to go and do some quick revision right now. Make sure you identify at least a relevant literary device in your discussion. Pretty important. If you can do the next step, which is discuss the effect of one of the literary devices, that's even better. So what effect does this literary device have on the reader or on the story? Try to do this, okay? You might like to discuss the effect of flashbacks in the text, and make sure, though, that it's relevant to your essay topic and to your contention in relation to that essay topic. Okay, now topic sentences. Use a simple topic sentence. You've been doing this since year 7. So hopefully you can all do this. So does your paragraph start with a sentence that both responds to the prompt? So make sure that it's appropriate for the command term. A few of you do need to revise those command terms. And does it summarize what the paragraph is about? If not, change it so that it does. See me on Meet, see if you need help with this. Do you develop a thematic topic sentence? That's the next step for you. Now, does your topic sentence focus on themes? Rather than just stuff that happens in the book, this is what I want you to do. Have a topic sentence that is analytical and refers to themes. Okay, so refer to your planning table, which is in the Google Doc, in the draft, where you should have listed themes that are relevant to your chosen essay prompt. Some of you haven't done that, and that's a problem, because that planning table is for you to use the words. It's not for fun. So please have a go at that. Use of evidence. Okay, so do you include a quotation to support your interpretation? So the important part here, which some of you haven't done, is make sure the quotation supports your interpretation of the text. If you've just put the quotation there willy-nilly and you haven't made it make sense, then you don't get to tick this off the rubric, okay? So you've got to include a quote, needs to support your topic sentence, and if the answer of either of these is no, then keep working until the answer to both is yes, okay? Really, really important. And this is pretty straightforward. Includes multiple quotations to support the interpretation, just like the last one, except with more than one quote. Now, integration of integration of quotations into sentences. This is really important because a couple of you are not doing this. You're kind of just leaving a quote there on its own, stranded, lonely. You need to work that quote into a sentence. So usually it helps if you use a shorter quote. So remember, you can cherry pick the quotes and just use the words that you need. It's a pretty handy skill to have. So are your quotes embedded into sentences? Now, if you don't remember how to do that, I've got a bit of an example here, which was from last week's work, okay? Now, explanation of evidence is really important. A lot of you are just, again, leaving quotes there and not explaining them. You've got to treat your reader like they're a little bit silly and don't quite understand things as well as you are, and explain your evidence and what it means in relation to both your topic sentence and your contention in regards to your essay prompt. Really important, okay? So do you explain what the quotes mean and what they're saying? You need to do this before you move on to the next criteria. If you haven't got this one, remember this is a rubric. So if you don't get the lower squares in the rubric, I can't give you any marks for the higher ones. So do the low ones first. So is your discussion, do you discuss a connection between the evidence and your prompt or contention? Okay, this is really important. So you need to explain how your quotes and other pieces of evidence relate to your topic sentence of your paragraph and how this in turn supports your contention in relation to the topic. Now, do come and see me on Meets if this is hard to understand. I'm there waiting for you to ask me for help. Trust me. So Oshimi Reader isn't a text analysis champ like you are, and that you need to make these connections for them. Even sometimes it might feel really obvious, and you say, oh, this is so obvious, how can you not infer that? Remember we talked about inferring? Well, make it obvious, okay? Linking sentences. Now, this is one that often gets left behind because the linking sentence, you feel like you've done the paragraph and then you can walk away. No, stop. Do the linking sentence, put in effort, it's really important. So your linking sentence needs to remind the reader why what you've just discussed is relevant to your essay prompt. Again, pretend like they're a little bit simple, like they don't understand things as well as you are. You've got to tie it all up and link it back, okay? So as we've said, this, and this is important because yada, yada, yada in relation to the essay prompt. Again, see me if you would like me to explain this in more detail for you. And if your linking sentence discusses the author's message, that's even better. Now remember, we're using a TL structure. So topic sentence, evidence, explanation, author's purpose, then the linking sentence. So this should not be the first time you talk about the author's purpose or the message, okay? If you can include that in your linking sentence, that's really cool. Right, so you get an extra mark for that. It's pretty nice. You should already have discussed the author's message for this point. All right, cool. Now, language. Can you use simple punctuation? For example, full stops, capital letters, commas, quotation marks correctly. Some of you have messed this up in your draft and you need to make sure you get it right. Okay? It might seem easy, but it's not. This is stuff that everyday people get wrong. And you need to go over your work with a fine-tooth comb to make sure you get it right. Okay, so have you used singular quotation marks throughout your paragraph where appropriate? Again, refer back to the last 2 weeks of work. If you're not sure, there's a section on quotations which will have an explanation of where you use singular quotation marks and where you have the double ones. Do all sentences and proper nouns start with a capital? Some of you haven't done that in your draft. Have you used the right it's or whose? And if you have used an apostrophe to denote a plurality, take my word, I will find you and I will throw you out a window. Right, so not doing this means that you cannot score the higher marks. If you don't do this, remember it's a rubric. So if you don't do the stuff lower on the rubric, I can't give you any of the higher up marks. Now, remember your word processor isn't always right. Frequently it gets it wrong. And this is not an excuse. So your word processor saying it's correct doesn't make it so. Now, do you use unit-specific vocab? Now, this means consistently and correctly using some of the vocab that we've been using throughout the course of the unit. So, this will include, but isn't limited to, words like intimacy, trauma, Bildungsroman. So look it up again if you've forgotten. Masculinity, transformation, identity, consent, homophobia, abuse, illusion, foreshadowing, schematic structure, symbolism, colloquialism, flashbacks, foreshadowing, euphemism, mental health, repressed memories. All these things are really important words. Now remember, we've put that in the planning chart for a reason, not for fun. None of you teachers think it's fun to make, well, some of them think it's fun to make charts, but that's not the reason why they made the planning table for you, okay? It's so you can use that to plan your paragraph. Use all the words that you put in that planning table. Really, really important. Analytical words, which are signposting words. So these are the words you use when you're explaining what the author is doing in the text. So does Chabossi advocate? Does he allude to? Does he articulate? Does he assert? Does he balance or build or bolster or cattle or categorize? All these words, right? Now, before you look at that list and say, oh, I'm very highly educated, I know words, I have the best words, remember that these each have their own meaning. They're not interchangeable, so you need to understand and be able to use them well. If you're confused, type into Google, define, and then the word, and you'll be able to work it out. Okay, so signposting words, similar thing. Signposting words or phrases give your reader an idea of what you're about to do. So, if you say, due to the fact that, then obviously you're going to explain a fact or a situation in text. Similarly, words like thus and accordingly and as a result and consequently and moreover, words like this means you're going to add to stuff, okay? Or in addition to which, firstly, secondly, thirdly, lastly, finally, clearly, in fact, interestingly, arguably, all these words can come in handy, but again, you need to understand what they mean in order to use them correctly. Okay? So again, ask me if you're unsure. That's what I'm here for. Now, the easy part, responding to feedback. I'm giving you points for doing the things that I asked you to do. I mean, it should be just, they're handy to do anyway, but hey, extra marks, how easy is that? Right, so you need to have submitted your draft in time for your teacher to give you feedback. If you leave it until the last hour before the thing's due, guess what? I can't give you feedback in time because I've got other classes that I need to deal with. Okay, you need to then change some of the things that have been suggested to. Now, successfully implementing all feedback. If you've managed to implement every single piece of feedback your teacher gives you successfully, then you get to tick this criteria off. Pretty nice. All right, so that's the whole thing. Please contact me via Meets if you have questions because that's what I'm waiting for during class. All right, have an awesome day. Good luck.